The November wind cut through Foxborough like a blade, carrying with it the scent of winter and the distant roar of traffic heading toward Gillette Stadium. Samuel Jackson pulled his worn Patriots jacket tighter around his weathered frame as he climbed the concrete steps to Section 315, Row 12, Seat 8, the same seat he'd occupied for the past 23 years. At 67, Samuel moved slower than he used to, his knees protesting each step with the authority of a man who'd spent 40 years swinging a hammer and laying foundation stones across Greater Boston. His calloused hands gripped the metal railings as he navigated through the familiar crowd of tailgaters and season ticket holders, most of whom had come to recognize the quiet man with the graying beard and the collection of handmade signs he brought to every game. "Samuel!" called out Jennifer Walsh from 3 rows down, waving enthusiastically. "I saved you a hot coffee." Jennifer, a 40-something marketing executive from Newton, had been sitting in Samuel's general vicinity for nearly a decade. Like many of the regulars in their section, she'd grown fond of the gentle giant who never missed a game and always had an encouraging word for the team, even during their darker seasons. "You're too kind, Jenny," Samuel replied, accepting the steaming cup with genuine gratitude. The warmth felt good against his fingers, which had been stiff and aching more frequently lately, another reminder of the news he'd received just 3 days ago. Dr. Elizabeth Harrison's words still echoed in his mind with crystal clarity. "I'm afraid the arthritis has progressed more rapidly than we anticipated, Samuel. Combined with your heart condition, continuing your current level of physical activity isn't advisable. You'll need to consider some significant lifestyle changes." What she didn't say, what she couldn't bring herself to say directly, was that his condition was deteriorating at a pace that would likely confine him to his small apartment within the next year. The same apartment where he'd been living alone since Martha passed away 14 months ago, leaving behind 40 years of marriage and a silence so profound it sometimes felt like drowning. Samuel settled into his seat and pulled out the sign he'd made for today's game against the Buffalo Bills. Written in his careful block letters on a piece of cardboard salvaged from a delivery box, it read, "Patriots faithful since 1971, through thick and thin." Below it, he'd drawn a simple but recognizable Patriots logo in red and blue marker. The stadium was filling rapidly despite the threatening gray clouds overhead. 28 degrees with a wind chill that made it feel like 18. Typical New England football weather that separated the devoted from the casual fans. Samuel had endured hundreds of games like this, some in conditions so brutal that even the most hardcore supporters stayed home. But not Samuel. Never Samuel. Robert Sullivan, the 72-year-old retiree who sat directly to Samuel's left, arrived with his usual punctuality, carrying a thermos of what Samuel knew would be excellent homemade clam chowder. "Afternoon, Samuel," Robert said, settling into his seat with a slight grimace. "How are you feeling today?" It was an innocent question, but Samuel detected something in Robert's tone that suggested concern. Word traveled fast in their tight-knit section, and Samuel suspected that news of his recent doctor's visits might have reached some of his stadium family. "Oh, you know," Samuel replied with forced lightness, "ready to watch our boys give Buffalo a proper New England welcome." Robert nodded, but his expression remained thoughtful. The two men had sat next to each other for 7 seasons, sharing countless conversations about football, life, family, and loss. Robert had been one of the few people who truly understood Samuel's grief after Martha's passing, having lost his own wife 3 years earlier. As the teams took the field for warm-ups, Samuel felt a familiar surge of anticipation mixed with something else, something that felt uncomfortably like melancholy. He watched the players going through their pre-game routines, their movements crisp and purposeful in the cold air. Coach Bill Belichick stood on the sideline, his hood pulled up against the wind, surveying his team with the intense focus that had made him legendary. Samuel had been watching Belichick coach for over 2 decades, through 6 Super Bowl victories and countless memorable moments. He'd always admired the man's dedication, his attention to detail, and his ability to get the best out of his players regardless of the circumstances. In many ways, Belichick embodied the qualities that Samuel most respected: loyalty, hard work, and an uncompromising commitment to excellence. The national anthem began, and Samuel stood with the rest of the crowd, his hand over his heart, as he'd done at every game for over 50 years. The familiar ritual felt different today, weighted with a significance he couldn't quite name. As the singer reached the climactic notes, Samuel found himself looking around at the faces of his fellow fans. Jenny, with her inexhaustible optimism, Robert, with his quiet wisdom, the Johnson family from row 15 with their 3 generations of Patriots supporters all bundled together. This was his family now. These strangers who'd become friends through shared passion and accumulated seasons of joy and heartbreak. They'd celebrated together during the dynasty years, commiserated through the occasional disappointments, and supported each other through personal challenges that extended far beyond football. The opening kickoff sent a jolt of electricity through the stadium, and Samuel felt his spirits lift despite his underlying concerns. For the next 3 hours, he could forget about doctor's appointments and mounting bills and the crushing loneliness of his empty apartment. For 3 hours, he could be exactly who he'd always been, a Patriots fan, pure and simple. The first quarter unfolded with the methodical precision that characterized many Patriots games. Buffalo had come to play, their defense forcing 2 early 3-and-outs that had the crowd grumbling with concern. Samuel remained optimistic, holding up his sign during television timeouts and joining in the defensive chants that rippled through the stadium like thunder. During a particularly long commercial break, he noticed a young stadium employee making his way up the steps toward their section. The kid, he couldn't have been more than 25, wore the official Patriots jacket and carried a clipboard. But his purpose wasn't immediately clear. "Excuse me," the employee said, stopping directly in front of Samuel's row. "Are you Samuel Jackson?" Samuel felt a flutter of confusion mixed with mild alarm. "Yes, that's me. Is everything all right?" "Everything's fine, sir. My name is Kevin Bradley, and I work in fan relations. I was wondering if I could speak with you briefly during halftime." "What about?" Samuel asked, genuinely puzzled. Kevin smiled mysteriously. "Just some questions about your experience as a longtime season ticket holder. It won't take long, I promise." After Kevin departed, Robert leaned over with raised eyebrows. "That was interesting. You're not in some kind of trouble, are you?" Samuel chuckled. "Not that I know of. Maybe they're doing some kind of survey." But even as he said it, Samuel felt a nagging sense that something unusual was happening. In all his years attending games, he'd never been singled out by team personnel for any reason. He tried to push the thought aside and focus on the action, but his curiosity had been piqued. The Patriots scored twice in the second quarter, taking a 14-3 lead into halftime on a touchdown pass that had the crowd roaring with approval. As the players headed to the locker rooms, Kevin Bradley reappeared, gesturing for Samuel to follow him. "I'll be right back," Samuel told Robert, who nodded with obvious curiosity. Kevin led Samuel down several levels to a service area beneath the main concourse, a part of the stadium Samuel had never seen before. The hallways were functional and plain, lined with pipes and electrical conduits that spoke to the massive infrastructure required to operate a facility of this size. "Where exactly are we going?" Samuel asked as they walked. "Just to a quiet place where we can talk," Kevin replied. "I hope you don't mind the walk." They eventually arrived at a small office that appeared to be used for storage, with stacks of promotional materials and team merchandise arranged on metal shelving units. Kevin gestured for Samuel to sit in one of 2 folding chairs that had been set up in the center of the room. "Mr. Jackson," Kevin began, consulting his clipboard, "how long have you been a Patriots season ticket holder?" "Well, I've had these particular seats since 2001, Samuel replied, "but I've been coming to games since 1971. Had different seats back at the old stadium, of course." Kevin made a note. "And in all that time, have you ever missed a home game?" Samuel thought carefully. "I missed 3 games when Martha, my wife, was in the hospital for her final treatment. Other than that, no. I've been here through everything." "That's remarkable dedication," Kevin said genuinely. "The organization appreciates fans like you more than you might realize." "It's just what you do when you love something," Samuel replied simply. Kevin asked several more questions about Samuel's experience, his opinions on various aspects of the game day experience, and his plans for the future. That last question hung in the air with particular weight, and Samuel found himself struggling to answer honestly. "I suppose I'll keep coming as long as I'm able," he finally said. Kevin nodded and made a final note. "Thank you so much for your time, Mr. Jackson. You should probably get back to your seat. The second half is starting soon." As Samuel made his way back through the maze of corridors, he couldn't shake the feeling that the conversation had been about something more than fan satisfaction surveys. There had been an underlying purpose that Kevin hadn't revealed, a sense that information was being gathered for reasons beyond simple research. He returned to his seat just as the teams were lining up for the second half kickoff, and Robert immediately peppered him with questions. "Just routine stuff about being a long-time fan," Samuel said, not entirely convinced himself. The third quarter proved to be a defensive battle, with both teams struggling to move the ball effectively in the increasingly harsh conditions. Snow had begun to fall, light at first, but gradually intensifying into the kind of steady precipitation that would make the final quarter challenging for both offenses. Samuel pulled his knit cap down over his ears and wrapped a blanket around his legs, concessions to age and comfort that he'd only recently begun allowing himself. The cold seemed to penetrate deeper than it used to, settling into his bones and joints with an insistence that reminded him uncomfortably of Dr. Harrison's warnings. But as he watched the Patriots' defense make a crucial fourth down stop, forcing Buffalo to turn the ball over on downs, Samuel felt the familiar surge of adrenaline that had sustained him through 5 decades of following this team. Win or lose, playoff-bound or struggling, this was where he belonged. The fourth quarter began with the Patriots nursing a 14-10 lead and possession of the ball at midfield. Coach Belichick paced the sideline with characteristic intensity, his focus absolute, despite the deteriorating weather conditions. Samuel had always admired Belichick's composure under pressure, his ability to make crucial decisions without betraying emotion or doubt. As the Patriots drove methodically downfield, converting 2 third-down situations with the kind of execution that had made them famous, Samuel found himself thinking about legacy, both the team's and his own. What would he leave behind when his time as a fan came to an end? What meaning could be found in 53 years of unwavering loyalty to a football team? The thoughts were interrupted by a touchdown pass that sent their section into euphoric celebration. Samuel stood and cheered with everyone else, holding his sign high and feeling momentarily free from the weight of his concerns. This was what mattered. Not the future with its uncertainties and limitations, but the present moment shared with people who understood the profound joy that could be found in something as simple as a perfectly executed play. As the game wound toward its conclusion with the Patriots controlling the clock and their 21-10 lead, Samuel began to experience a strange sense of finality. Though he had no reason to believe this would be his last game, something about the day felt like an ending. Perhaps it was the conversation with Kevin Bradley, or maybe just the accumulation of small reminders that his time as an active participant in this community was drawing to a close. The final whistle blew to a roar of approval from the home crowd, and Samuel joined in the celebration while quietly saying goodbye to moments he feared he might not experience again. As he packed up his sign and prepared for the slow exodus from the stadium, he tried to memorize the feeling of belonging that had sustained him through so many seasons of his life. "Great game," Robert said as they prepared to leave. "Same time next week?" "Wouldn't miss it," Samuel replied, hoping it was true. As he walked down the stadium steps for what might be the last time as a healthy man, Samuel Jackson carried with him the echoes of cheers and the memory of shared joy. He didn't yet know that his story was just beginning, that his decades of faithful support had been noticed by people who mattered, and that the most extraordinary chapter of his life as a Patriots fan was about to unfold. The Tuesday morning sun streamed through the grimy windows of Sullivan's Diner on Route 1, casting long shadows across the cracked vinyl booths where Samuel Jackson sat nursing his third cup of coffee. The diner had been his regular breakfast spot for the past 8 years, ever since Martha's diagnosis made cooking at home feel like an overwhelming task. Now, 14 months after her passing, The routine had become both comfort and necessity. "You're looking thoughtful this morning, Samuel," observed Sally Chen, the diner's owner and chief waitress, as she refilled his cup without being asked. At 55, Sally had been running the place for nearly 2 decades, and she possessed the rare gift of knowing exactly when her customers needed conversation and when they preferred solitude. "Just thinking about Sunday's game," Samuel replied, though his thoughts had actually been occupied by the strange encounter with Kevin Bradley and the lingering questions it had raised. "Another Patriots win," Sally said with satisfaction. "My husband keeps saying they're having a down year, but 16 straight wins at home tells a different story." Samuel smiled. Bill knows what he's doing. Always has. The truth was that Samuel had been thinking about more than just football. Since Sunday's game, he'd been experiencing an odd sense of anticipation, as if something significant was building just beyond his perception. The feeling was both exciting and unsettling, particularly given the uncertainty that had come to characterize so many aspects of his life. His cell phone buzzed against the Formica table, an ancient flip phone that Martha had insisted he carry for emergencies, and which he'd never quite learned to use with confidence. The caller ID showed a number he didn't recognize, which usually meant a telemarketer or wrong number. "Hello?" he answered cautiously. "Mr. Jackson? This is Amy Foster from the New England Patriots organization. I hope I'm not calling at a bad time." Samuel nearly dropped the phone. "No, not at all. What can I do for you?" "I was wondering if you might have some time this week to visit our facilities in Foxborough. We'd like to speak with you about your experience as one of our longest-tenured season ticket holders." The request was so unexpected that Samuel found himself momentarily speechless. Well, yes, I suppose I could do that. What exactly did you have in mind? Would Thursday afternoon work for you, around 2 o'clock? I can arrange for parking and provide directions to the appropriate entrance." After providing his agreement and contact information, Samuel ended the call with a mixture of excitement and bewilderment. In 53 years of following the Patriots, he'd never had any direct contact with the organization beyond purchasing tickets and concessions. The idea that they wanted to meet with him personally seemed both thrilling and improbable. Sally had been listening with obvious curiosity. "Good news?" "I'm not sure," Samuel replied honestly. "The Patriots want to meet with me on Thursday." "That's wonderful. What for?" "They didn't say exactly. Something about being a longtime fan." Sally's face lit up with genuine pleasure. "Samuel, that's fantastic. You've been going to those games longer than most people have been alive. It's about time someone recognized your dedication." The rest of Samuel's week passed in a blur of anticipation and nervous energy. He found himself second-guessing everything from his wardrobe choices to his conversational skills, wondering what the Patriots organization could possibly want from a retired construction worker with no particular expertise beyond unwavering loyalty. Thursday afternoon found him driving his 15-year-old Honda Civic through the familiar streets of Foxborough. But instead of heading toward the main stadium parking areas, he followed Amy Foster's directions to a side entrance he'd never noticed before. The security guard at the gate checked his name against a list and provided him with a visitor's badge and detailed directions to the administrative offices. The Patriots facility was impressive in a way that Samuel hadn't expected. While he'd seen glimpses of the training facilities during television broadcasts, walking through the actual corridors where players and coaches worked daily felt almost surreal. Photographs of legendary moments lined the hallways: Super Bowl victories, championship teams, iconic players frozen in moments of triumph. Amy Foster's office was located in a section of the building dedicated to community relations and fan services. She turned out to be a woman in her mid-30s with an enthusiastic demeanor and the kind of professional warmth that suggested genuine passion for her work. "Mr. Jackson, thank you so much for coming," she said, rising from behind a desk covered with photographs of community events and fan activities. "Please have a seat. Can I get you anything? Coffee? Water?" "I'm fine, thank you," Samuel replied, settling into a comfortable chair across from her desk. "I have to admit, I'm curious about why you wanted to meet." Amy smiled. "Well, That's a conversation that starts with Kevin Bradley from our fan relations department. After he spoke with you on Sunday, he submitted a report that caught the attention of several people in our organization. What kind of report? The kind that highlights exceptional fans who embody the values and spirit that make our community special, Amy explained. Samuel, did you know that our records show you've attended 347 consecutive home games spanning 5 decades? Samuel felt a flush of surprise. You keep track of that? We keep track of a lot of things, especially when it comes to fans who demonstrate the kind of loyalty and dedication that you have. But what really caught our attention wasn't just your attendance record. It was the stories that other fans told Kevin about you. What stories? Amy consulted a file on her desk. Jennifer Walsh told him about the time you gave your tickets to a military family when you had pneumonia, but still wanted the seats to be used. Robert Sullivan mentioned how you've quietly helped several fans in your section during difficult times, paying for parking when someone was struggling financially, driving elderly fans to games when they could no longer make the trip themselves. Samuel felt uncomfortable with the attention. That's just what neighbors do for each other. That's exactly the point, Amy said. You've created a sense of community that extends far beyond football. The Johnson family specifically mentioned how you helped their teenage son through a difficult period after his father was deployed overseas, taking the time to talk with him at every game and providing a positive male role model during a challenging time. The conversation was taking a direction that Samuel hadn't anticipated. He'd never thought of his interactions with fellow fans as anything special. They were simply the natural result of spending years sharing the same space with good people who happened to love the same team. Mrs. Foster, he said, I appreciate the kind words, but I'm not sure I understand why this matters to the organization. Amy leaned forward with obvious enthusiasm. Samuel, we're launching a new community initiative called Patriots Family, designed to recognize and celebrate fans who exemplify the best aspects of our fan base. We want to tell stories about people like you, fans whose dedication goes beyond just attending games and extends to creating positive connections with other people. She pulled out a folder containing what appeared to be promotional materials and planning documents. We're hoping you'd be willing to participate in some community events and maybe share your story with other fans. Nothing too demanding, just opportunities to highlight the kind of positive fan culture that makes Patriots Nation special. Samuel examined the materials with growing amazement. The initiative appeared to be substantial, with plans for community events, charitable activities, and fan recognition programs. The idea that his simple devotion to the team could be considered worthy of such attention was both flattering and overwhelming. I don't know, he said slowly. I'm not much of a public speaker, and I'm not sure I'd be comfortable with a lot of attention. We wouldn't ask you to do anything that makes you uncomfortable, Amy assured him. This would be entirely at your own pace and comfort level. The main thing is that your story, your example of what it means to be a dedicated fan and good community member, could inspire other people. As Samuel considered the proposal, he found himself thinking about Martha and what she might have said about such an opportunity. She'd always been proud of his loyalty to the team, but more importantly, she'd been proud of the friendships he'd developed and the small ways he'd helped others over the years. Perhaps this could be a way of honoring her memory while doing something positive for the community that had given him so much support during difficult times. What would I need to do? He asked. Amy's smile widened. For now, just be yourself. We'd like to start by having you attend a few upcoming games as our guest, giving us opportunities to document your interactions with other fans and capture some of the community spirit that you help create. Eventually, we might ask if you'd be willing to participate in some charity events or speak at small fan gatherings, but only if you're comfortable with it. The meeting continued for another 30 minutes, with Amy explaining more details about the Patriots Family initiative and answering Samuel's questions about expectations and commitments. By the time he left the facility, Samuel felt cautiously excited about the prospect of being involved with something that could make a positive difference for other fans. As he drove home through the late afternoon traffic, Samuel couldn't help but reflect on the unexpected turns his life was taking. 3 months ago, he'd been dealing with Martha's final illness and the crushing loneliness that followed her death. 6 weeks ago, He'd received the troubling news about his own health that suggested his active years were numbered. And now, somehow, his devotion to a football team was opening doors to opportunities he'd never imagined. That evening, he called Robert Sullivan to share the news about his meeting with the Patriots organization. "That's incredible, Samuel," Robert said with obvious delight. "I can't think of anyone who deserves recognition more than you do." "I just hope I don't disappoint them," Samuel replied. "I'm not used to being in the spotlight." "You won't disappoint anyone by being exactly who you've always been," Robert assured him. "That's what got their attention in the first place." After ending the call, Samuel sat in his small living room, surrounded by decades of Patriots memorabilia, photographs, ticket stubs, programs, and newspaper clippings that chronicled his journey as a fan. For the first time in months, he felt a sense of purpose and possibility that extended beyond simple survival. He didn't yet know that his involvement with the Patriots Family Initiative would soon lead to an encounter that would change not only his own life, but also touch the heart of the most successful coach in NFL history. He couldn't have imagined that his story of faithful devotion was about to intersect with Bill Belichick's own understanding of loyalty, dedication, and the bonds that connect people across the seemingly simple shared love of a game. But as Samuel prepared for bed that night, he felt something he hadn't experienced in a long time: anticipation for what tomorrow might bring. For a man who'd been quietly preparing to say goodbye to the life he'd known, the possibility of new beginnings felt like an unexpected gift. The Patriots Family Initiative was about to discover that sometimes the most extraordinary stories are found in the most ordinary people, and that true greatness often reveals itself not through individual achievement, but through the quiet ways we lift up those around us. Samuel Jackson was about to become living proof that loyalty and kindness, sustained over decades, can create ripples that reach far beyond anything we might imagine. The November morning air carried the crisp promise of winter as Samuel Jackson made his way through the employee entrance of Gillette Stadium, still somewhat disoriented by the unfamiliar routine. 2 weeks had passed since his meeting with Amy Foster, and today marked his first official participation in the Patriots Family Initiative. Instead of climbing to Section 315 with his homemade sign, he would be spending the pre-game hours in the stadium's community relations suite, participating in activities designed to showcase positive fan culture. Amy greeted him with her characteristic enthusiasm, introducing him to a small crew from the team's media department who would be documenting various aspects of the Patriots Family program. Samuel felt a flutter of nervousness at the sight of the cameras, but Amy quickly reassured him that they would remain unobtrusive and that he should simply act naturally. "Today's going to be pretty low-key," she explained as they walked through corridors that were becoming gradually familiar. "We're hosting a small gathering of longtime season ticket holders, sharing stories, and celebrating the community that makes Patriots Nation special. You don't need to do anything except be yourself and enjoy the conversation." The community relations suite turned out to be a comfortable space with large windows overlooking the field, furnished with casual seating areas that encouraged informal interaction. About 20 fans had been invited, representing different eras of Patriots history and various sections of the stadium. Samuel recognized a few faces from his own section, but most of the attendees were strangers who shared his passion for the team and his long history of attendance. As the group settled in with coffee and light refreshments, Amy facilitated introductions that quickly revealed the remarkable depth of experience represented in the room. There was Dorothy Martinez, who had attended games with her late husband since the AFL days and still made the trip from Springfield at age 78. James Washington, a Vietnam veteran, had shared season tickets with his 3 brothers for over 30 years, creating an annual tradition that had survived military deployments, job changes, and family upheavals. But it was Sarah Campbell's story that resonated most deeply with Samuel. A single mother from Worcester, she had been bringing her autistic son Tommy to games for 8 years, finding that the structured routine and communal excitement helped him manage his social anxiety. When Sarah mentioned the challenges of affording tickets on a teacher's salary, several other fans in the room nodded with understanding. The financial sacrifice required to maintain season tickets had become increasingly difficult for many working families. "The thing is," Sarah said, her voice carrying a mixture of determination and vulnerability. Tommy looks forward to these games all week long. He's memorized every player's statistics, and he knows exactly where our seats are and what time we need to arrive. Taking that away from him would be devastating. Samuel found himself thinking about his own relationship with Patriots football and how it had provided structure and meaning during the most difficult periods of his life. When Martha was receiving treatment, the twice-monthly home games had offered brief respites from the hospital routine and something positive to anticipate. After her death, the familiar rhythms of the season and the connections with his stadium family had helped him navigate the overwhelming loneliness. As the conversation continued, Samuel began to understand that his own story wasn't unique in its depth of meaning. It was simply part of a larger tapestry of fans whose lives had been genuinely affected by their connection to the team. The difference, he realized, was that his story had been noticed and elevated, while countless others remained anonymous despite their equal significance. During a break in the formal discussion, Samuel approached Sarah and introduced himself. "I couldn't help but notice you mentioning the ticket costs," he said quietly. "I know it's not my business, but would it help if I could find some resources that might make things easier?" Sarah's eyes filled with tears. "That's incredibly kind, but we manage. It just means sacrificing other things." "No parent should have to choose between their child's happiness and basic necessities," Samuel replied. "Let me talk to some people and see what might be available." The exchange was brief, but it reinforced Samuel's growing understanding that his role in the Patriots Family Initiative could extend beyond simply sharing his own story. Perhaps his position could become a bridge connecting the organization with fans who needed support, creating opportunities to strengthen the community that had given him so much. As the gathering concluded and fans began to disperse toward their seats for the afternoon game against the Cleveland Browns, Amy Foster pulled Samuel aside for a private conversation. "How are you feeling about everything so far?" she asked. "It's been eye-opening," Samuel replied honestly. "I hadn't realized how many fans have stories similar to mine, people for whom this team represents much more than entertainment." Amy nodded. "That's exactly what we're hoping to highlight through this initiative. The Patriots organization wants to better understand and support the community that has supported us for so many decades." She paused, consulting her phone for what appeared to be a text message. "Samuel, I have something exciting to share. Coach Belichick has heard about the Patriots Family Program, and he's specifically asked to meet some of the participating fans. Would you be interested in joining a small group for a brief meeting next week?" Samuel felt his heart skip slightly. The prospect of meeting Bill Belichick, the coach he'd admired from afar for over 2 decades, was both thrilling and intimidating. "What would that involve?" he asked. "Nothing formal," Amy assured him. "Coach just wants to hear directly from longtime fans about their experiences and what the team means to them. It would be a small group, very casual, maybe 15 or 20 minutes. Despite his nervousness, Samuel found himself nodding. "I'd be honored." The game that afternoon took on special significance for Samuel as he watched from the community suite rather than his usual seat in section 315. The elevated perspective and comfortable surroundings were luxurious, but he found himself missing the energy and camaraderie of his regular section. During halftime, he excused himself and made his way up to section 315 to check on his stadium family. "Samuel!" Jennifer Walsh exclaimed when she spotted him approaching. "We were wondering where you were. Robert said you were involved in some kind of special Patriots program." "Something like that," Samuel replied, feeling slightly awkward about the attention. "How's everyone doing?" The next few minutes were filled with updates about various section regulars, someone's new grandchild, another person's job change, the usual blend of personal news that kept their small community connected. But Samuel noticed something different in how people interacted with him, a subtle deference that suggested word of his involvement with the Patriots organization had spread beyond his immediate circle. "We're proud of you, Samuel," said Helen Rodriguez, a season ticket holder from row 10 whom he'd known casually for several years. "It's about time someone recognized what you mean to all of us." The comment was well-intentioned, but it made Samuel uncomfortable. He'd never sought recognition, and the idea that his fellow fans might see him differently because of official acknowledgement felt contrary to the authentic relationships that had developed naturally over years of shared experiences. As he returned to the community suite for the second half, Samuel reflected on the complex dynamics that were emerging from his involvement with the Patriots Family Initiative. While he appreciated the organization's efforts to celebrate longtime fans, he was beginning to understand that recognition could sometimes create distance from the very community it was meant to honor. The Patriots won the game decisively, 28-13, with a performance that demonstrated the disciplined execution that had become their trademark under Bill Belichick's leadership. As Samuel watched the coach's post-game interview on the suite's television, he tried to imagine what their upcoming meeting might entail and what insights he might offer to someone whose understanding of football far exceeded anything Samuel could comprehend. The week leading up to the meeting with Coach Belichick passed quickly, filled with Samuel's usual routines but colored by anticipation and nervous excitement. He found himself rehearsing potential conversations and worrying about making a good impression on someone he'd admired for so many years. Amy Foster called on Tuesday to provide details about the meeting, which would take place on Thursday morning at the team's practice facility. She emphasized again that the session would be informal and brief, designed simply to give Coach Belichick an opportunity to hear from fans who represented the heart of Patriots Nation. "Just be yourself," she advised. "That's what got you into this program, and that's what Coach wants to hear about." Thursday morning arrived gray and cold, with the kind of November weather that made Samuel grateful for heated buildings and warm clothing. He arrived at the Patriots facility 30 minutes early, partly from nervousness and partly from a lifelong habit of punctuality that Martha had always teased him about. The meeting was scheduled to take place in a conference room adjacent to the coaching offices, and when Samuel arrived, he found 3 other fans already waiting. He recognized Dorothy Martinez from the previous week's gathering, but the other 2 participants were new to him. A middle-aged man who introduced himself as Peter Quinn and a young woman named Lisa Chen, who appeared to be in her 20s. As they made small talk while waiting, Samuel learned that each of the selected fans represented a different demographic and perspective within Patriots Nation. Peter had been a season ticket holder for 15 years and was active in several fan clubs throughout New England. Lisa was a recent college graduate who had grown up attending games with her family and now represented younger fans who were building their own traditions around the team. At exactly 10:10 a.m., Amy Foster entered the room accompanied by Bill Belichick himself. Samuel felt a moment of genuine awe at meeting someone whose leadership and strategic brilliance had defined his experience as a Patriots fan for over 2 decades. In person, the coach appeared slightly smaller than Samuel had expected, but his presence filled the room with an authority that was immediately apparent. "Good morning, everyone," Coach Belichick said, settling into a chair across from the group of fans. "I want to thank you for taking time out of your schedules to meet with me. As you probably know, we're always looking for ways to better understand and serve our fan community. And Amy tells me that each of you represents the kind of dedication and loyalty that makes Patriots Nation special." His manner was more conversational and personable than Samuel had anticipated, based on his typically serious demeanor during press conferences. There was a warmth in his voice and a genuine interest in his eyes that immediately put the group at ease. "I'd like to hear about your experiences as Patriots fans," Coach Belichick continued. "What brings you to games week after week, year after year? What does this organization mean to you beyond just football?" Dorothy Martinez spoke first, sharing her story about attending games with her late husband and how the Patriots community had helped her maintain connections and purpose after his passing. Peter Quinn talked about the traditions he'd built around Patriots football and how they'd become central to his family's identity. Lisa Chen described growing up with the team and how Patriots football had provided stability during her parents' divorce and her own transition to adulthood. When it came to Samuel's turn, he found himself speaking more openly than he'd expected about Martha's illness, his own health concerns, and the way his stadium family had sustained him through difficult times. "Coach," he concluded, "I know this might sound strange, but watching you work for all these years has taught me things about dedication and perseverance that have helped me in my own life. The way you and your teams handle adversity, The way you always find ways to improve and adapt, those lessons extend far beyond football. Bill Belichick listened intently throughout Samuel's story, occasionally asking follow-up questions that demonstrated his genuine engagement with what was being shared. When Samuel finished, the coach was quiet for a moment before responding. "Samuel, what you've described, that commitment to showing up regardless of circumstances, that loyalty to something bigger than yourself, those are exactly the qualities we try to build in our players and our organization. The fact that we've had some success means nothing without fans like you who understand what that commitment really costs." The meeting continued for nearly an hour, far longer than the promised 15 minutes, as Coach Belichick asked detailed questions about the fan experience and listened carefully to suggestions about how the organization might better serve its community. Samuel was struck by the coach's genuine curiosity and his obvious respect for the perspectives being shared. As the meeting concluded, Coach Belichick shook hands with each fan personally, thanking them for their time and insights. When he reached Samuel, he paused slightly. "Samuel, Amy tells me you've been coming to games for over 50 years. That's remarkable dedication. I hope we'll have opportunities to talk again." "It would be my honor, Coach," Samuel replied, still somewhat overwhelmed by the surreal experience of having an extended conversation with someone he'd admired from afar for so many years. As the group dispersed and Samuel prepared to leave the facility, Amy Foster approached him with obvious excitement. "Samuel, that was fantastic. Coach was really impressed with your story and your insights. In fact, he's asked if you might be interested in participating in a special recognition ceremony that we're planning for later this season." "What kind of ceremony?" "We're still working out the details, but it would involve recognizing several longtime fans during a home game, probably sometime in December. It might include some on-field recognition and definitely would highlight your story as an example of what makes Patriots Nation special." The prospect was both exciting and daunting. While Samuel appreciated the recognition, he remained uncomfortable with the idea of being singled out for activities that felt natural and unremarkable to him. "Can I think about it?" he asked. "Of course," Amy replied. "Take all the time you need. The important thing is that you're comfortable with whatever we plan." As Samuel drove home from the meeting, he reflected on the morning's experiences and the unexpected directions his life was taking. 6 months ago, the idea of having a personal conversation with Bill Belichick would have seemed like an impossible fantasy. Now, that conversation had actually happened, and it had been meaningful in ways that extended far beyond simple fan excitement. More importantly, Samuel was beginning to understand that his involvement with the Patriots Family Initiative was creating opportunities to make a positive difference in other people's lives. His conversation with Sarah Campbell about ticket costs had led to Amy connecting her with financial assistance programs. His story about the supportive community in Section 315 had inspired plans for expanded fan recognition programs throughout the stadium. That evening, Samuel called Robert Sullivan to share news about the meeting with Coach Belichick. "Incredible," Robert exclaimed. "What was he like?" "Exactly what you'd hope," Samuel replied. "Intelligent, thoughtful, genuinely interested in what we had to say. He asked questions that showed he really cares about the fan experience." "Did you tell him about our section?" "I mentioned how important the community has been to me, especially after Martha died. He seemed to understand that the relationships are just as important as the football." After ending the call, Samuel sat in his living room looking through photo albums that chronicled his decades as a Patriots fan. Images of tailgating with friends, celebration photos after big wins, pictures of Martha bundled up in winter gear, cheering alongside him, visual evidence of a lifetime built around shared passion and community connection. For the first time since receiving his troubling medical diagnosis, Samuel felt genuinely optimistic about the future. While his physical limitations might eventually require changes to his routine, his involvement with the Patriots Family Initiative was opening new possibilities for remaining connected to the community that meant so much to him. He didn't yet know that Coach Belichick had been profoundly affected by their conversation, that the stories shared by Samuel and the other fans had reinforced the coach's own understanding of what made the Patriots organization special. He couldn't have imagined that their brief meeting had planted the seeds for a gesture that would soon capture the attention of the entire football world and demonstrate that sometimes the most powerful victories happen far from the scoreboard. But as Samuel prepared for bed that Thursday night, he felt a deep sense of gratitude for the unexpected opportunities that were emerging from his simple devotion to a football team. At 67 years old, with uncertain health and an uncertain future, he was discovering that loyalty and kindness, sustained over decades, could create possibilities he'd never imagined. The Patriots Family Initiative had found in Samuel Jackson exactly what it was looking for, a fan whose story exemplified the best aspects of sports fandom and community connection. What it hadn't anticipated was that Samuel's story would soon intersect with Coach Belichick's own philosophy about loyalty and recognition in ways that would create one of the most memorable moments in Patriots history. December arrived in New England with the kind of bitter cold that separated casual fans from true believers, and Samuel Jackson found himself facing what might be his final month as an active member of Patriots Nation. The arthritis in his hands and knees had worsened noticeably since his last meeting with Dr. Harrison, and the stairs to Section 315 now required careful navigation and frequent rest stops. But even as his physical limitations became more apparent, Samuel's involvement with the Patriots Family Initiative had deepened significantly. What had begun as simple recognition for long-time loyalty had evolved into something more meaningful, a role that allowed him to serve as a bridge between the organization and fans who needed support or encouragement. Amy Foster had kept Samuel busy throughout November with various community events and fan engagement activities. He'd participated in hospital visits with current players, sharing his story with young patients who found inspiration in his decades of unwavering dedication. He'd spoken at small gatherings of youth football teams, emphasizing the values of persistence and loyalty that transcended sports. Most meaningfully, he'd helped identify and assist several fans who were struggling financially but didn't want to give up their connection to the team. The work had given Samuel a sense of purpose that he hadn't felt since retiring from construction, and it had helped him process his own fears about the future. If his time as an active fan was limited, at least he could use whatever influence he'd gained to help others maintain their own connections to the community that had sustained him through so many challenges. On a particularly cold Tuesday morning, Samuel received a call from Amy that seemed different from their usual coordination conversations. "Samuel, I need to ask you to keep something confidential for now, but I wanted to give you advance notice about something special that Coach Belichick is planning." "What kind of something?" Samuel asked, intrigued by the secretive tone. "I can't share all the details yet, but it involves recognizing you during our December 18th game against the Bills. Coach has been working on this personally, and it's going to be more significant than anything we've done before through the Patriots Family program." Samuel felt a familiar mixture of excitement and apprehension. "What would I need to do?" "For now, just make sure you're available for that game, and maybe the day before for some preparation. We'll provide all the details as we get closer, but I wanted you to have time to think about it and make any necessary arrangements." After ending the call, Samuel sat in his kitchen trying to imagine what kind of recognition might require personal planning from Bill Belichick. In their November meeting, the coach had seemed genuinely moved by Samuel's story, but the idea that he would invest personal time in planning some kind of tribute felt almost impossible to believe. The uncertainty was both thrilling and nerve-wracking. Samuel had grown more comfortable with public attention through his recent community activities. But something about Amy's tone suggested that whatever was being planned would be more significant than anything he'd experienced so far. Later that afternoon, Samuel drove to the Patriots facility for what had become a weekly meeting with Amy to review upcoming community activities. But when he arrived at her office, he found her conferring with several people he didn't recognize. Men and women in business attire who appeared to be engaged in detailed planning discussions. "Samuel, perfect timing," Amy said as he entered. "I'd like you to meet some people who are helping coordinate the special event we discussed." The introductions revealed a team that included representatives from the NFL's Public Relations Department, the Patriots media staff, and what appeared to be event planning specialists. The scope of coordination suggested something far more elaborate than Samuel had anticipated. "Mr. Jackson," said David Peterson, who identified himself as the Patriots' Director of Special Events. "We're working on something that we think will be truly memorable, both for you and for Patriots Nation. But we want to make sure we're approaching this in a way that honors your story appropriately." "What exactly are you planning?" Samuel asked. David exchanged glances with Amy before responding. "We're still finalizing details, but Coach Belichick wants to create a moment that recognizes not just your individual loyalty, but what you represent about the broader Patriots community. It will involve some on-field recognition during the game and probably some media coverage, but the specifics are still being worked out." The conversation continued for nearly an hour, with various team members asking Samuel about his preferences, his comfort level with different types of attention, and his thoughts about what kind of message such a recognition should convey. Throughout the discussion, Samuel was struck by the care and thoughtfulness that was clearly going into whatever was being planned. "The most important thing," emphasized Jennifer Walsh, a different Jennifer from his stadium section, who worked in the Patriots Community Relations Department, "is that this feels authentic to who you are and what your story represents." Coach Belichick was very specific about that. He doesn't want this to feel like a publicity stunt or something artificial. As the meeting concluded, Samuel left with more questions than answers, but also with a growing sense that something extraordinary was being planned. The level of organizational attention and the involvement of multiple departments suggested an event that would extend far beyond simple fan recognition. That evening, he called Robert Sullivan to share what he could about the upcoming recognition, while being careful to respect the confidentiality that Amy had requested. "They're planning something special for the Bills game," Samuel explained. "I don't know exactly what, but it involves Coach Belichick personally, and apparently quite a bit of coordination." "That's fantastic, Samuel," Robert replied. "You deserve whatever recognition they're planning. Is there anything I can do to help?" "Actually, there might be. They asked about family and close friends who might want to be involved. Would you be interested in attending as my guest?" "I wouldn't miss it for the world." The weeks leading up to December 18th passed with increasing anticipation and continued secrecy about the specific nature of the planned recognition. Samuel participated in several additional planning meetings, each of which revealed new layers of complexity and coordination. There would be media interviews, both before and after the event. There would be special seating arrangements for Samuel and his guests. Most intriguingly, there were references to game day coordination that suggested whatever was planned would happen during the actual contest, rather than simply during a timeout or halftime break. As the date approached, Samuel found himself experiencing a range of emotions that he hadn't expected. While he was grateful for the recognition and excited about the opportunity to represent longtime Patriots fans, he was also somewhat overwhelmed by the attention and concerned about living up to whatever expectations were being created. 3 days before the game, Amy Foster called with final details and instructions. "Samuel, I can finally share more specifics about what Coach Belichick has planned," she said, her voice carrying obvious excitement. "What's going to happen is unprecedented in our organization's history and probably unprecedented in the NFL." "What do you mean?" "Coach wants to honor you by bringing you onto the field as an honorary captain for the coin toss. But that's just the beginning. He's also arranged for you to lead the team out of the tunnel before the game, wearing a special jersey with your name on it." Samuel felt his breath catch. The idea of leading the New England Patriots onto the field at Gillette Stadium was so far beyond anything he'd imagined that it seemed almost surreal. "But there's more," Amy continued. "During the game, if the Patriots score a touchdown, Coach wants you on the sideline to participate in the celebration. And at the end of the game, regardless of the outcome, he wants to present you with a game ball and officially retire your seat number in recognition of your 5 decades of loyalty." The scope of what was being planned left Samuel momentarily speechless. In 53 years of following the Patriots, he'd never imagined being anything more than a spectator. The idea of actually participating in the game day experience at such a level felt both thrilling and overwhelming. "Amy, I don't know what to say. This is incredibly generous, but are you sure I'm worthy of this kind of recognition?" "Samuel, Coach Belichick doesn't do anything without careful consideration. He believes your story represents the best of what sports fandom can be, and he wants to use this opportunity to honor not just you, but all the fans who have supported this organization through good times and bad. After ending the call, Samuel sat in his living room trying to process the magnitude of what was being planned. The recognition would extend far beyond anything he'd experienced through the Patriots Family Initiative, creating a moment that would likely be remembered by fans for years to come. But even as he felt honored by the gesture, Samuel couldn't shake a slight sense of unease about being elevated so far above his fellow fans. His loyalty was genuine and long-standing, but so was the loyalty of thousands of other Patriots supporters who had never received any special recognition. That evening, he drove to Gillette Stadium and walked slowly around the exterior, looking up at the structure that had been such a central part of his life for so many years. In 3 days, he would enter that building, not as a fan seeking entertainment, but as an honored guest participating in activities that few people ever experienced. As he stood in the cold December air, looking at the stadium that held so many memories, Samuel reflected on the journey that had brought him to this moment. From a young man attending games at the old stadium with friends, through decades of shared experiences with Martha, to his current role as a widower finding new purpose through community service, his relationship with the Patriots had evolved and deepened in ways he never could have anticipated. The recognition that Coach Belichick was planning represented more than just acknowledgement of his individual loyalty. It was a celebration of the connections between teams and communities, the bonds that form when people share passion and dedication over extended periods of time, and the ways that sports can provide meaning and purpose that extend far beyond entertainment. Samuel didn't yet know that his story was about to become national news, that the gesture Coach Belichick was planning would be covered by media outlets across the country and would inspire similar recognition programs throughout professional sports. He couldn't have imagined that his simple devotion to a football team would soon become a symbol of the positive impact that loyal fans can have on the organizations and communities they support. But as he prepared for what would undoubtedly be the most memorable day of his life as a Patriots fan, Samuel Jackson carried with him the same qualities that had first attracted the organization's attention: humility, gratitude, and a genuine desire to serve something larger than himself. In 3 days, those qualities would be on display for the entire football world to see, creating a moment that would remind everyone why sports matter and why the connections between teams and their communities are worth celebrating. December 18th dawned clear and brutally cold, with temperatures hovering near 15 degrees and a wind that cut through even the heaviest winter clothing. Samuel Jackson had been awake since 4:30 a.m., not from nervousness, but from excitement so pure and intense that sleep had become impossible. Today would mark not just the culmination of his involvement with the Patriots Family Initiative, but potentially his final game as an active member of Patriots Nation. The morning began with a special breakfast at the Patriots facility, where Samuel was joined by Robert Sullivan, Amy Foster, and several team officials who had become familiar faces over the past 2 months. Coach Belichick made a brief appearance, pulling Samuel aside for a private conversation that would remain between them. "Samuel, I want you to know that what we're doing today isn't just about recognizing your loyalty," the coach said quietly. "It's about honoring what loyalty means and what it can accomplish when it's sustained over time. Your story represents something important that extends far beyond football." "Coach, I can't thank you enough for this opportunity," Samuel replied. "I just hope I can live up to whatever expectations you've created." "You don't need to live up to anything," Belichick assured him. "Just be exactly who you've always been. That's what got us here." At noon, Samuel was fitted with his special jersey, a custom Patriots uniform with Jackson 53 on the back, representing his 53 years as a fan. The jersey was identical to those worn by the players, but modified slightly for comfort and ease of movement. When he saw himself in the locker room mirror, wearing the uniform of the team he'd supported for over 5 decades, Samuel felt a surge of emotion that nearly overwhelmed him. The pre-game activities began 2 hours before kickoff, with Samuel participating in the coin toss as an honorary captain alongside the team's regular captains. Standing at midfield in Gillette Stadium, wearing a Patriots jersey, shaking hands with Bills captains who showed obvious respect for what he represented, The entire experience felt like a dream that he was afraid he might wake up from. But the coin toss was just the beginning. As the teams returned to their locker rooms for final preparations, Samuel was escorted to a special area near the tunnel, where he would wait for his opportunity to lead the Patriots onto the field. The significance of the moment wasn't lost on him. In a few minutes, he would be the first person to emerge from the tunnel that had been crossed by legendary players and coaches throughout the stadium's history. At 3:58 p.m., exactly 2 minutes before the scheduled kickoff, Samuel took his position at the front of the Patriots' tunnel. Behind him, arranged in their usual pre-game formation, stood the entire New England Patriots team, players, coaches, and staff who had collectively won 6 Super Bowl championships and established themselves as one of the most successful organizations in professional sports history. "Ready, Samuel?" asked team captain Matthew Slater, placing a hand on Samuel's shoulder. "Ready," Samuel replied, though his voice carried a slight tremor that betrayed his emotional state. The tunnel erupted with the team's traditional pre-game chant, a thunderous roar that echoed off the concrete walls and seemed to shake the very foundation of the stadium. As the chant reached its crescendo, Samuel began walking toward the bright December sunlight that marked the entrance to the field. The sound that greeted him as he emerged from the tunnel was unlike anything he'd experienced in 53 years of attending Patriots games. The entire stadium, 65,178 fans, rose to their feet in a sustained ovation that seemed to go on forever. Signs throughout the crowd celebrated his story. "Thank you, Samuel, 53 years of loyalty, and Patriots faithful forever, and Section 315 loves you." Samuel paused at the edge of the field, overwhelmed by the response, before beginning his walk toward the Patriots' sideline. Behind him, the entire team followed, but the attention was focused entirely on the 67-year-old retired construction worker who had become the symbol of everything positive about sports fandom. As he reached the sideline, Samuel was greeted by Amy Foster and other Patriots personnel who guided him to a special area where he would watch the first quarter of the game. The view was spectacular, field level, directly behind the Patriots bench, with a perspective on the game that he'd never imagined possible. The first quarter unfolded with typical Patriots efficiency, with the defense forcing 2 Buffalo punts and the offense moving the ball steadily without finding the end zone. Samuel found himself studying the game from an entirely different perspective, observing the coordination and communication that occurred between plays and gaining new appreciation for the complexity of professional football. Early in the second quarter, Patriots quarterback Mac Jones connected with wide receiver Kendrick Bourne on a perfectly executed crossing route that resulted in a 23-yard touchdown. As the stadium erupted in celebration, Samuel felt hands guiding him toward the field itself. "This is your moment," Amy Foster said, barely audible over the crowd noise. What happened next would be replayed on highlight reels and social media for months to come. As the Patriots players celebrated in the end zone, Samuel Jackson jogged onto the field wearing his custom jersey, heading directly toward the group of professional athletes who immediately embraced him as one of their own. The celebration lasted nearly 30 seconds longer than usual, with players taking turns acknowledging Samuel and including him in their touchdown dance. The crowd's reaction was deafening, a wall of sound that seemed to lift the roof off the stadium. Television cameras captured every moment, broadcasting Samuel's joyful participation to a national audience that had never seen anything quite like it. But Coach Belichick wasn't finished. As the Patriots lined up for the extra point, the public address announcer's voice boomed across the stadium. "Ladies and gentlemen, in recognition of 53 years of unwavering loyalty and dedication to the New England Patriots, Coach Bill Belichick would like to present Samuel Jackson with today's game ball." The words had barely finished echoing when Bill Belichick himself walked onto the field, carrying the official game ball and heading directly toward Samuel, who stood near the Patriots sideline, still somewhat stunned by everything that was happening. What occurred next was unprecedented in NFL history. As Coach Belichick approached Samuel with the game ball, he did something that no one in the stadium expected. He signaled to the referees to stop the clock, effectively pausing the game itself for the presentation. The referee's whistle brought play to a complete halt. Players from both teams, officials, coaches, and 65,178 fans watched in complete silence as Bill Belichick, one of the most successful coaches in professional sports history, presented a game ball to a fan whose only claim to fame was 5 decades of faithful support. "Samuel," Coach Belichick said, his voice carrying clearly in the sudden quiet of the stadium, "this game ball represents more than just today's contest. It represents 53 years of loyalty, dedication, and the kind of unwavering support that makes this organization special. On behalf of the entire Patriots family, thank you for showing us what it means to be truly faithful." The presentation lasted only about 30 seconds, but those 30 seconds created a moment that transcended sports entirely. When Coach Belichick handed Samuel the game ball and embraced him in a brief but genuine hug, the stadium erupted in the loudest ovation in Gillette Stadium history. Louder than any Super Bowl celebration, louder than any game-winning touchdown, louder than any championship moment. As play resumed and Samuel returned to the sideline, he clutched the game ball with trembling hands, unable to fully process what had just occurred. In his wildest dreams, he had never imagined being recognized on such a scale. Never envisioned that his simple devotion to a football team could result in a moment that would be remembered forever. The game continued with the Patriots eventually winning 31-17, but the score was almost irrelevant. The story that would dominate sports news for the next week wasn't about touchdowns or defensive stops. It was about a coach who understood that sometimes the most important victories happen off the scoreboard, and a fan whose loyalty had inspired an entire organization to pause and acknowledge what really matters. In the aftermath of the game, as Samuel was interviewed by reporters and photographers captured images of him holding his game ball, he struggled to find words that could adequately express his gratitude and amazement. "I just came here to watch football," he told one reporter. "I never imagined that my loyalty could mean so much to anyone else. This day has shown me that sometimes being faithful to something you love can create possibilities you never dreamed of." Later that evening, as Samuel sat in his small apartment surrounded by 53 years of Patriots memorabilia, he held the game ball that Coach Belichick had presented to him and reflected on the incredible journey that had brought him to this moment. From a young man attending games at the old stadium, through decades of shared experiences with Martha, to his current role as a symbol of fan loyalty, his relationship with the Patriots had evolved in ways he never could have anticipated. The game ball sat on his kitchen table, tangible proof that his devotion had been noticed and valued by people whose opinions mattered to him more than he could express. But even more meaningful than the recognition was the knowledge that his story had inspired similar gestures throughout the sports world, encouraging other organizations to acknowledge and celebrate the fans whose loyalty sustains them through every season. Samuel Jackson had begun the 2023 season believing it might be his last as an active member of Patriots Nation. Instead, he had ended it as a symbol of everything positive about sports fandom, having participated in a moment that would be remembered long after his own time as a fan had ended. The gesture that stopped the game had lasted only 30 seconds, but its impact would continue for years to come, reminding everyone who witnessed it that loyalty, sustained over time, can create connections that transcend the simple relationship between entertainment and audience. In recognizing Samuel Jackson, Bill Belichick had honored not just one man's faithfulness, but the profound bonds that can develop when people dedicate themselves to something larger than their individual concerns. And in that recognition, Samuel had discovered that sometimes the greatest victories in life come not from personal achievement, but from inspiring others to understand the power of unwavering dedication to the things and people we love most.